Okay, thanks everyone. There is this lovely announcement that goes off every half an hour here in the library, so I wanted to wait until that was done before I started talking. Thank you all for being here tonight. I'm Carrie, I'm the one you got the emails from, and I'm pleased to introduce our instructor, Nicole Kowalski, who owns her own Photoshop business, or no, I said that wrong, communications business. And she is a Photoshop expert. She teaches for Tri-C. We're really excited to have her. Just a few housekeeping things. I do have a passport appointment I have to run to, so I'm going to be jumping out and I'll be back later. But excitingly, this is being recorded, so I'll be able to catch up on the class later when I get back. While I'm gone, if you have Zoom questions, not Photoshop questions, but Zoom questions, please use the chat to, when you click on the 2 in the chat and click on Sam. Sam is my colleague and he does not have a microphone, but he is on the chat and he is ready to help with any Zoom specific questions you might have. And then Nicole will be conducting the class, via screen share. If you have a question about Photoshop, she may not answer it right away, but you can go ahead and type that in the chat and then she will address it when she gets a moment. So I'm hoping to be back by 7 p.m., which is when we will do the question and answer part. If not, I hope you all have a wonderful class and I'm going to turn it over to Nicole.
All right. Hi, everyone. So a couple things. First, if you don't mind muting yourself until the end, I'm going to do the tutorial. Like Carrie said, feel free to drop questions to me in the chat. And if I see it as I'm going, I'll try to answer that question right away. So we have this icebreaker question up here. Drop your first name and one thing you want to learn in this class into the chat. And that way I can kind of try to make sure I address whatever the specific topics are that you guys want to learn about. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to change my screen share to, this is the Adobe website. And here you'll see that the easiest way for you to get Photoshop, if you do not have it, would be to subscribe via the Creative Cloud. And Adobe has versions that are compatible with both PC and Mac. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to drop this into the chat for you guys. So if you don't have Photoshop today, but you want to have it for next class so that you can follow along, or since this tutorial will be recorded, if you plan on just kind of watching, observing, maybe taking notes today, and then you're going to go back and maybe watch this later on and do things alongside me step by step, that's fine. But if you have Photoshop and you want to work alongside me, feel free to pull it up. And we can, you can have the Zoom next to your Photoshop interface, and that would be perfectly fine. There is a Dropbox that Carrie, I believe, sent a link to. And in that is a image that we're going to be working with today, as well as the lesson plan that I came up with which kind of just outlines the topics for each class. All right. So feel free to go ahead and you can download either of those. The image that I am using for this class, I downloaded from unsplash.com, which is a stock image site that allows you to use images. So you will see an image credit on that image because I do want to give the person, the photographer, credit for their artwork. So before we move on, just wanted to, I can drop that URL into the chat if that's easier for some of you guys. So give me 1 second and I will just click. We'll share this. Okay, and here is the Dropbox link. All right. So let me make sure really quickly also that nobody else has tried to join. Make sure I don't have to admit anyone. Okay, great. So I am going to share my Photoshop screen now. Let me pull up Photoshop. Okay. And let's see, Adobe Photoshop. Can you all see my Photoshop screen? Yeah, cool. All right. So this is how Photoshop looks when you first open an image in it. And that's going to be pretty important. So let me just close out of it and show you what it looks like without an image open in it. So, you know, we have this blank interface where you can create a new file using this button here, create new, or you can click this open button, and that will allow you to select the specific photograph that you want to use for the day. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to do that. And I'm going to open the picture that I want to use. So I'm going to go ahead and find that right now. And that's going to be this one that I just had open. Great. So the first thing that we're going to learn how to do is I have this image open, but let's say you wanted to create an image from scratch because maybe you want to create a flyer for yourself. If you go to File, New, it will pull up this interface, this new document interface. And here at the top, you'll see that we have some different options, right? Recent are maybe recent sizes that you frequently use in the interface. Photo, print, art and illustration, web. And when you click on these things, it kind of changes some of the settings in Photoshop for you. So if you wanted to create a flyer and you click print, it'll kind of automatically generate the size of 8.5 by 11 for you there. So you can go ahead and you can click create, and it will open up a blank page for you to design within. Okay, so the most important thing that I can give to all of you, the most important piece of knowledge is to frequently save your work. So you should always, as soon as you have a new document or you make significant progress on editing something, you should always hit save. So we're going to go ahead and save as, and we're going to save this just as a Photoshop document, which will save layers. So that's a good thing to write down, is you want to save your progress as a Photoshop document. We're just going to title this letter because that's a letter size page. All right. And you'll notice that since I did that, I have two tabs up here. I have that image that we are using from Wesley Gibbs. And then I have, and you can see his little credit I put down here. And then we have our letter.psd. So today is going to be a lot of basics, right? So I just showed you how to create a file, you know, an 8.5 by 11 image here in Photoshop, and as well as opening an image in Photoshop. So those are the two primary ways you're going to create documents within Photoshop. Let me look at my list and see what's next to teach you guys. Okay, so saving your file, that's important. Like I said, file, save as, allows you to save your file. I know I kind of breezed past it, but the file extension for Photoshop is .psd, and that's a Photoshop document. And that's important because as we learn more about Photoshop and how it works, PSD files save a lot of that information as you're editing. If you save something as a JPEG.jpg, what that does is it kind of flattens everything and it takes up less information. And a JPEG is typically, you know, the way that I think most of us are familiar with working with different files. So that's one important thing. What's the next thing? Okay. Another file format that you can save as, and I'm going to write some notes here, and you guys can feel free to, you know what, probably can't see that. For some reason, my copy is all in white. Okay, so .psd equals Photoshop file. Everyone pretty much knows what a JPEG is, but that's an image file. You can also save something as .pdf from Photoshop. There's probably not too many instances in which you'll do that, but you know, that's a good format for saving layers as well, but Photoshop is really recommended. So those are really the two file formats that I want you guys to remember, .psd and .jpg. Okay. The next thing is a quick little interface tour. So in Photoshop, at the top, you'll see that there's a lot of options. There's Photoshop, File, Edit, Image, and you can kind of click on all those and it'll have drop-down menus. Also here along the left-hand side, there are all these different tools, and all these different tools have a different function. And as we go, I will be focusing in on each of these tools for you. Some of the ones that are most commonly used are the type tool, which is what I just used to create these words here. And you just go ahead and click on it. And when you click it, it'll pull up a little cursor and it allows you to either draw a box or just click and you can start typing. So there you go. There's one example of how I created a type box. Now, something that I want us to all kind of focus on for a second is here on the right-hand side. Do you all notice how there's a little icon that looks like two papers on top of each other and it says layers, and that's highlighted? That is the layers panel right here. And you'll notice that every time I typed something new, it created a new layer. So now I have 3 layers here. So earlier when I said that you could save something as a Photoshop file, so a .psd, if you save this file as .psd, it will remember all these layers. And then you can come back later and you can click in and edit them if you notice maybe you had a spelling error or something of that nature. So .psd will preserve these layers. Let's say whenever you're done, you click and save this as a JPEG. Unfortunately, what it will do, it will compress all those layers together into one. It will flatten your image and you won't be able to edit your type anymore. So those are probably the big differences to keep in mind as you are creating files. I typically work in a Photoshop document format, so .psd, until I'm ready to say that my work is final. So that's one important note. And that also is a really good time for me to kind of go over the layers panel. So let's say you want to create a new layer. This little button here at the very bottom, you'll see it has, it's like a square with a plus sign in it. If you click that, you can click and create a new layer. So now I have a layer titled layer 1. It kind of just auto generates a name for your layer. But then I'm like, well, I don't know. I don't really want that layer anymore. This little garbage can icon here at the bottom, you can go ahead and just delete it. And then it's gone, right? So that is a really quick and easy way of creating and deleting layers. You can also move layers. You can reorder them by just clicking within the layers panel and dragging. And that's kind of important because in Photoshop, the layer that is in front is the topmost layer. And so that's kind of an important thing. So I'm going to go to File. I'm going to go to Image Size, and it's going to pull up this little window here. So this is a pretty important thing to note. And this would also be something that maybe would be worth taking notes, and I will go ahead and I will put the notes here on my document so that you guys can write it down more easily. But there's a couple of differences when you're in Photoshop that you should remember that are going to make your life so much easier. So this little thing here where it says resolution and it says pixels per inch, if you're working with a document that you want to print, it's important to remember that 300 pixels per inch is print resolution. Very often you will open up a file and it will be 72 pixels per inch. 72 pixels per inch means that it's formatted for web or for a screen. And if you print something at 72 pixels per inch and it is not a good print resolution, what you'll see is that it looks pixelated. And I'm sure everybody's kind of seen something that when they print, it looks a little pixelated. So you want to make sure that the images you're working with or the documents you're creating are at 300 pixels per inch if you intend to print it and want it to look nice. Okay. Another thing that I'd like to kind of go over is the image mode. So if you go to image and then mode, there are two options that I want you guys to remember. And one is RGB, which stands for red, green, blue. And there's one called CMYK, and that stands for cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. K stands for black in this instance. So let me go ahead and type this right here into my document so that you guys know, and you can take notes if you are doing that. And give me 1 second. All right. And then 72. Oops. I just typed that in the chat by accident. Okay. So there we go. And then we'll do red, green, blue. And lastly, CMYK. All right, so this is important for one reason, and that is CMYK stands for ink colors or pigments. And when you layer cyan, magenta, and yellow on top of each other, it makes black. So that's pretty important to remember because RGB is actually light, and that's the three pigment colors of light that screens emit. So scanners, TVs, computers, things of that nature, all are going to emit light versus a piece of paper actually is reflecting light back at your eye. So it's a little bit different right now. The important thing to remember is if you want to send something off to be printed, I recommend trying to format it to CMYK. If you know that whatever you're creating is going to be viewed on a screen, like on the computer, RGB is the way to go. All right. So those are some quick notes that I think would be really good for you guys to all remember. The next thing is, so as I was showing you guys this toolbar over here, kind of glossed over some of that, but the nice thing is some of this is really easy. And if you look at the tool, it's kind of self-explanatory what the tools are for. So here at the top, it's like a little X that are arrows at the end. That's our move tool. So if you go ahead and you use the move tool, you can go ahead and move around different objects on your artboard. So that's a really handy one. Another one that I really like, and I'm going to go to my layers panel here, and I'm going to go ahead and create a layer to show you guys this, is the brush tool. The brush tool is pretty much a universal tool that I use all the time in Photoshop. Even for really advanced stuff, the brush tool has its own purpose. So I have the brush tool open. Right here down on the bottom, you see how there's a black and a white square, and they're kind of layered over top of each other. If you double click that black square, what you can do is a color picker will pull up and it will give you some different color options. And then there's like a slider and you can slide it. And that's pretty helpful because it allows you to pick pretty much any color from the rainbow. And then you'll notice there's like a little circle here, and that will kind of, as you move it around, a preview of that will show here in the box labeled new. So I think this is a pretty nice teal color. I'm going to go ahead and just draw something here for you guys. And this is my smiley face layer. So now that we have the smiley face layer, I want to actually name that layer in my layers panel. So if you go ahead and you go back to your layers panel and you just click, it'll kind of highlight it in blue, and it will allow you to change the name of your layer. So there we go. My smiley face layer is now actually named smiley face. So the brush tool, like I said, has a lot of uses. You can also change your brush tool if you double click, and it's sort of different. I'm on a Mac, so sometimes if I talk about keyboard shortcuts and you notice that you're on a PC and it's not the same for you, go ahead and give me a chat in the chat window and let me know. But you can change the hardness of it. So if I take the hardness down to 0%, this is what my brush tool looks like. See, it looks really kind of fuzzy now. So this is with really soft edges, and then this smiley face here is with really hard edges. Okay. Are we good? Does anyone have any questions they want to drop in the chat? I'm just going to keep going, right? Cool. So we did the type tool. Another tool that I think is really kind of fun is this shape tool. And if you click and hold down, it opens up a whole little flyout panel of all these different options. So we have rectangle, rounded rectangle, ellipse, triangle, polygon, line, custom shape tool. So we're just going to use a circle. I want to change the color of my circle though. So here's a really good little tip. Shapes in Photoshop, you have the ability to, who was that? I think Tracy was asking about vector objects. That's maybe for another class we can talk about, but if you are working with shapes in Photoshop, that's an opportunity to create a vector object. So if I'm going to create a circle, you'll see it opens up a circle here. And then up here at the very top of your interface towards the left-hand corner, there's a little box that says fill, and then there's one that says stroke. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to fill it with black, and then I'm going to change my stroke to this teal color. And when you apply a stroke to something, you also need to designate how thick that stroke is going to be. So you'll see here, I have designated this to be an 8 pixel stroke. Maybe I kind of want it to be a little bit heavier, so go like that. So there you go. There's my circle with a black fill and a teal stroke. And that is now its own layer. So if we go back to layers, you guys will be able to see that that layer is called ellipse 1. And I like that Photoshop helps you out a little bit, and it gives you these different layer names that it just kind of auto generates, because I think for me at least, it helps me keep track of my different layers. So that is really helpful, that Photoshop does that. Okay, so as you're in Photoshop, you'll notice I have all these different sort of like toolbars here on the side. And over time, you'll start to learn more about it. But if you go to Window, Workspace, I like to use the Essentials, which is the default that Photoshop pulls up. So the really important ones to have here are layers. And I also like to have color, and I like to have history. Oh, you missed how we got to the circle. Great question. Let me go back. I was pretty quick there. The circle is here on the left-hand side in the toolbar. And if you look here, there's like a little preview of a shape. If you hover your mouse over it, you'll see that it's actually, called ellipse tool, but if you hold down on it, it pulls up all these different shape options. So like I could select rectangle. We'll do rectangle this time. And since I just created a shape, it's going to auto-generate the same fill and stroke for my rectangle that I'm about to create. So you'll see here on the left, now it looks like a little rectangle here, and it's sort of like highlighted a darker color. So you just go ahead and you draw your shape, and it has the same settings applied as the circle does, the ellipse. So a black fill and a teal stroke. Okay. I hope that answers your question. Another panel that I like to keep in my interface is this history panel. I'm just going to pull that out here in the middle. This is really cool because it shows you all the actions that you've taken. So if you ever are unsure, if you made a mistake and you're unsure of where you went wrong, you can actually like go back in history and just see how each of the changes that you've made have progressed. And I think that that's kind of cool. So that's a pretty helpful panel to have, especially if you're a beginner and you want to make sure that you're not messing anything up. Because I'll tell you what, you make mistakes all the time, and there's nothing that you do in Photoshop that you can't fix. So that's the good news. But largely, I would say that the layers panel is probably the most important panel for you guys to focus on. The history panel is just kind of like my little like trick that I like to tell everyone because I think it really helps beginners. So, and the way that you get those items in your panel is so I think that on Zoom, for some reason, it doesn't show the very top toolbar. There's a toolbar at the top, and one of the options is window. And if you click on window, you can scroll down to workspace. Can you guys see that? Can you see where it says workspace? And it has all these different workspace options. But sometimes if you just want to add an individual panel to your toolbar, you can click and it's listed, all of them are listed here, right? So let's see, what's a good one to add? We'll just click, I think we have paths already. Do we? Click paths. So we do have paths, that is here already. So if you go to window, maybe timeline. No, you have that one there too. Styles, there we go. There's a new one. So that will make these little new toolbars pop up in your interface. Okay. Let's see. What is next on my list? Sorry, I have to refer back to my list. My little lesson plan for the day. Okay, perfect. So selecting an area, we did that. I'm going to go back to my other image here. Okay. And let's say that you want to select this whole sky area because maybe you want to change the sky. What I would do personally is I would use this quick selection tool. And there's also, if you hold down, you'll see that there's other options. There's also a magic wand tool, which is pretty cool. I'll show you that first. So the magic wand tool will kind of it decides for you what it wants to select. So you can see here that there's like this little like dancing dotted line that selects something. But let's say I want to select the whole sky. The quick selection tool, which like I said, hold your mouse down and click and hold down over that little brush area and select quick selection tool. You can go ahead and you can select the sky. See, and now you can see the little dotted line all the way around, right? So let's say I wanted to change the sky color and do something totally crazy. Let's make a pink sky. You select the sky, you go to your layers panel, and you click this create a new layer. And then you can go to your color picker, select the color that you want, hit OK. And then this little tool here that looks like a paint bucket is a paint bucket tool. So go ahead and click the paint bucket tool. And now you have a pink sky. And you'll see here that in your layers panel, that is a whole different layer. So you can turn it off and you can see what the sky looks like normally, or you can turn it on and you can see a pink sky. So that is one kind of fun thing that I like to do. Today, the simple project is basically if you guys have Photoshop and you want to practice some of the things that I went over, selecting or just maybe overlaying type over top of the image, you can go ahead and you can do that. Let's see. And my type is pink, so that's why we can't see it. There we go. So if you guys want to pull that up on your computer, you guys can kind of go ahead and play around. But that is really it for the tutorial part of the project today. We are right at 7 o'clock. So do we have any, oh, can you please repeat the sky deal? Of course I can. So I'm going to go ahead and delete these layers. And we're going to do it all over again. Ready? Okay, so layers panel is open so we can see what we're doing. We're going to go to this quick selection tool on the left-hand side, right? I'm going to click the quick selection tool and it'll kind of auto-generate a circle with like a little dot in the center of it. So you go ahead and you just click and drag on the sky. And does everyone see the little dancing dotted line that's kind of like moving? All right, so once you have the sky selected, go to your layers panel and we want to add a new layer. So add a new layer. And we're going to then go to our paint bucket tool. And then you just click inside the field, which is the sky area, and it will dye it pink. Let's say though, I have the background layer selected and I go ahead and I paint it. You'll notice what happens, right? It doesn't form like a solid shape. It kind of paints in the picture. And what that does is you actually altered your base layer, which is titled background, and you want to avoid doing that. So the key thing to remember in Photoshop is always to create a new layer anytime you do something, because it allows you to, you can see here, I'm clicking this little eye icon. Obviously, when the eye is on, it means that you can see the layer. If I click off and you can't see it anymore, it's just like a little blank square here. That means the layer is invisible. So visible, invisible. So there you go. And then to create a word or some kind of type over it, you can go ahead and type in, not that, hello with an O. You can go ahead and type right in there. And so now you look at the layers panel and you'll notice 3 layers. My background layer, which is the original image layer. The layer 1, which is pink sky. So I'm going to go ahead and revisit that from earlier. I'm going to double click in layer 1. I'm going to title it pink sky. And then hello is my type layer. The cool thing about type layers is whatever you type when you are typing the type layer, that's just going to be what the layer is named. So you can know what you're looking at. Something to note here is, see how we are in the layers panel on the pink sky. That is what is selected. If you were to click, now we are using the move tool here from the left-hand side. So if you go ahead and you click it and you can move the sky around. Well, we don't want to do that. We don't want to move the sky around. So if you make a mistake, which like I said, I do all the time, no big deal. Command Z, Z as in zoo. Command Z is undo, and that will undo whatever you just did. So, whoops, I moved the sky, Command Z, back to where it was. Okay, so we have a question. Since Photoshop costs money for the premium version, how can I edit photos without paying? All right, so that's a good question. Photoshop is a subscription-based service. I don't know for sure, but I believe that on eBay, you can buy previous versions of Photoshop before they went to Creative Cloud. So Photoshop is currently a cloud-based software. And what's good about that is Adobe can do updates for you. And it kind of just like updates right to your computer because it is all cloud-based. But if, cost is a concern for you, and maybe this isn't something where you want to pay that subscription, you're just kind of casually using Photoshop to edit your own photos, remove red eye, brighten smiles, things like that. So what some people do is they go onto eBay and they just search Photoshop 2016. I think 2016 maybe was one of the last years that they really stopped promoting the discs, but it'll come with, a pack of CDs, and then you would install the software onto your home computer using some discs that come in a box. And I believe those are still available online through various sources. but you do have to pay for Photoshop. The nice thing about that link that I put into the chat is if you guys want to try Photoshop for free for 7 days, you can get a 7-day trial from Adobe. So if you want to work from a previous version of Photoshop, if you don't mind that, just, give Adobe Photoshop maybe 2013 or 2015 a quick search in maybe eBay or even Amazon. I'm not really sure, but you can definitely find some of the software online. Carrie also just sent out a note that they have Photoshop access at the library, and they will be updating their license soon, so it will be available for public use. So if you guys don't have Photoshop at home and you don't want to necessarily invest in that, you can always go to the Twinsburg Library and use the computers there. So, all right, let me see. What other questions did I miss? Doesn't look like I missed anything yet. Does anyone have anything specific? Because if not, I can show you guys something else that I think is pretty cool. No other questions? Okay.
If no one else is going to come off camera, then we can actually keep the recording going. So if everyone's comfortable with that, we'll just keep recording.
Sure, I do see one question here. Can I explain again how to get multiple layers? Absolutely. Oh, and also, not sure who 561479 is, but if you're enrolled in college, you can get a discount on your Adobe licenses. That is true. If you have like a .edu email address. So to get more layers in your layers panel, you just go to your layers panel, and here at the bottom, there is a little plus sign within a square. And if you hover over it, it'll say create new layer. So that's your new layer option. So if you click that, that will pull up a new layer for you. There are certain actions when you take them in Photoshop that will automatically generate a new layer. And one of those is the type tool. The type tool will just sort of automatically generate a new layer. And you'll see that here. I now have another layer that says hi. So you'll notice that that layer is here. That layer says hi. And that kind of auto-generated whenever I use the type tool. Okay, and then this new layer button here, create a new layer. If I click that, maybe I want to, use my paintbrush tool that we talked about earlier. So right here, I know I went over this earlier, but if you double click in this little box here, you can select what color you're using. So go ahead and select a new color, go to your paintbrush tool, and you should be able to use your paintbrush tool to paint, right? And so you'll notice that when I did that, it appears as if I painted over the word hello. So if I wanted to see hello again, you'll remember that note I said earlier about the layer that is on top is the layer that is the most in front, if you want to think about this in terms of like how the layers stack. So all I have to do is take and drag this hello layer all the way up above layer 1. Now my layer hello is, it appears over that blue. And then a quick little tip that I think is kind of cool. If you want to just really quickly and easily resize hello, let's say I want to make it really big. Command T transforms it. And that's really helpful because you can just, you'll see it, a box appears around it with this little arrow here in the corner. And if you just click and drag, you can resize hello. All right. And then to accept the changes that you've made, you would click this little check mark here. And if you don't want to accept the changes you just made, you would click this little circle with a line through it. But we're gonna give it the thumbs up, and we're gonna go ahead and click accept the changes. We're gonna use the move tool again. We're gonna move hello. And we have our little hi here. So I'm gonna move that. Oh, so if you're on the move tool and you double click within a type layer, it will automatically highlight it because Photoshop thinks that you want to edit it. So let's do that. We'll go ahead and type something in it. We have another little smiley face here that I have typed in. So now we're going to use the move tool and we're going to move it up. And do you guys notice how there's like these little like magenta lines that keep popping up? Photoshop does a really good job. They try to help you with aligning things. So if you are moving high around and you want to know where like the top of something else is, or if you want to make sure it's on the same baseline, Photoshop will give you these little hints there. Did you see how it kind of did that? And it helps you snap the bottom of high to hello. So that's kind of a fun little trick that once you get to know Photoshop better, you'll start to notice those little guidelines, and those can help you align things. Okay. So another really cool tool that I want to show you guys is this little color picker tool, this eyedropper tool. So let's say that you were like, huh, that is a really great shade of blue here in the water. I'd like to take that shade of blue and I would like to integrate that somewhere else within my layout. But you want to make sure you're getting that exact color of blue. If you go to the eyedropper tool, click on that, it'll pull up a little eyedropper icon. You see that kind of floating around in there. And you can sample the color, and you notice that it changed it here in this little color box on the left-hand side. So let's try that again. Let's try and sample this green, and keep your eye on that little color sample box in the left-hand, on the left-hand side there, changes to green. If we want to sample maybe the brown from the roof of this gorgeous house, there we go. And then it sampled the color brown. If we want to sample green from the trees, there's the green. So you can just sample whatever color it is you want. It'll automatically change that here. And then you can go to maybe, I don't know, your shape tool or your brush, and you can make edits to, this using maybe your brush tool. So we're starting to get a little carried away here with the colors, but you guys get the idea. All right. Okay, so it looks like we're going to be wrapping up here in a minute or two. Does anyone have any last minute questions for me? I'll talk about next week. So next week, we're going to be learning more of the basics. I know this maybe isn't the most exciting stuff, but this is really helpful for you guys to learn. We are going to be doing 2 really cool projects in this class. So next week, we're going to be doing more of the basics. Some of it is recapping this week and maybe answering questions if you guys have any questions based off of this week. But also next week, we're going to be doing some cool things. Some easy photo edits that anyone can do to improve a photograph. So if you guys get the program and you want to work alongside me next week, something that you could do is have a photo saved to your computer that you want to improve. And I will go over with you guys how to make some really easy photo edits. So that'll be something that we can do next week. And that'll be our simple project. Okay. And yes, the interface is pretty tiny. There are settings within the program that you can kind of customize it, but the interface is a pretty hefty interface. There's all kinds of different tools and panels. So I think that the best thing you can do is in your personal settings on your computer, usually there's an option to kind of like enlarge things. So yeah, I'm sorry, it is kind of tiny though. All right. Okay,
Well,
Carrie, well, I'll hand it back to you.
I will send out the recording once it is done, and we will see everyone next week.
All righty. Bye, everyone.
All right, bye-bye.